He was a single dad scraping by, doing everything to raise his little girl with dignity when an unexpected wedding invitation arrived. Not a gesture of kindness, but a cruel joke from the woman who left him behind. But what no one saw coming was who he brought as his guest, and what she did in that room full of judgment silenced every mocking laugh. This is not just a love story. It's a story about second chances, quiet bravery, and the kind of dignity no one can take away. Let the story begin. A single dad was invited as a joke, but what his guest did made the groom regret everything. The water had boiled down to a hiss in the dented kettle on the stove when Lucas Bennett spotted the envelope on the floor. He frowned. It must have slipped through the mail slot sometime during the chaos of dinnertime mac and cheese night, Emma's favorite, or maybe while he was plunging the leaking sink upstairs again. He wiped his hands on a towel and picked it up. The envelope was cream-colored, thick like wedding cake fondant, embossed with gold edges that practically screamed money. He turned it over. His name was handwritten in calligraphy. Lucas didn't need to open it to know where it came from. But he did. And the second he saw the names Vanessa Langston and Derek Hale, his stomach coiled like a spring. He stood still for a beat. Outside, a siren howled in the distance, chasing after someone else's mess. Inside, the silence in the kitchen was suddenly too loud. He stared at the elegant swirls of Vanessa's signature inked just beneath the printed text. She'd always had a flair for aesthetics. Even her cruelty had a flourish. Tucked below the invite was a note card. One sentence, handwritten, neat, clinical. Feel free to bring someone if you can. The smirk practically dripped off the page. He almost laughed. Almost. 5 years. It had been 5 years since Vanessa had walked out of the old apartment, stilettos echoing against the hardwood floor, her engagement ring left on the counter beside a pile of unpaid bills. That was the week his father died. The week he gained full custody of Emma after her mother vanished. The week he went from engineer with potential to unemployed single father with nothing but a toolbox and a 2-year-old. He folded the card in half and tossed it toward the trash. "Missed?" Emma's voice called from the hallway light, and sleepy Daddy Lucas turned, catching her reflection in the kitchen mirror. Her curls were wild pajamas inside out again, dragging her teddy bear by one arm. "You're still up, baby girl," he asked gently. "I heard you talking." She rubbed her eyes. Was it the mailman? He hesitated. Just an invitation. For a party. Emma's face lit up. A party. Like with dancing and dresses. Lucas knelt. "It's kind of fancy. Not really for us." Her smile dimmed, but didn't disappear. "Is it the princess kind? Like the ones on TV?" He opened his mouth to say no, then paused. Emma's life had been a series of clipped dreams and second-hand birthdays. He'd done everything to protect her from the heaviness of what they didn't have, but maybe just once she deserved to see what princess looked like, even if only from a distance. He pressed his forehead gently to hers. "We'll see, Peanut." The next morning, Lucas found the card again still on the floor. Crumpled slightly at the edges, but that smirk of a sentence stared back at him like a dare. He should ignore it. No, he should burn it. But some masochistic voice in his gut whispered, "You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for her." He remembered how Vanessa used to look at him near the end like he was a weight tied to her heel. She'd used phrases like, "You're too small town. You've got too much baggage. I can't spend my life raising your kid." But Emma wasn't baggage. She was the only thing in his life that hadn't let him go. That afternoon, Lucas worked a repair job at a local church downtown. The place doubled as a shelter and food pantry 3 nights a week. He came by often, not just for work, but because he respected the kind of people who kept trying to fix things others walked away from. While gathering buckets near the side entrance, he noticed someone sitting alone under a sycamore tree sketching. Her posture was upright, even regal, but her coat was worn at the elbows and her boots didn't match. Her face was angled down, focused on the notebook in her lap, But it wasn't until Emma, who'd come along for the day with her backpack full of crayons, wandered over, that Lucas got a good look at the stranger. She had the kind of beauty that wasn't obvious, the kind that lingered in the eyes. A quiet intelligence. A wounded grace. Emma plopped down beside her like they'd known each other forever. Lucas walked over, half apologetic. "Sorry, she's curious." The woman glanced up, then back down. "She's fine. She wanted to see the castle." Lucas peeked. Her drawing was stunning, a Gothic-style palace framed by willow trees. Emma's mouth hung open. "You an artist?" he asked. "No," she said simply. "Not anymore." He didn't press. They chatted briefly. Her name was Maya Ellis. She didn't say much else, but she didn't ask for anything either. And when Emma tugged on her arm and asked, "Will you draw my dad too?" Maya only nodded and started sketching with practiced ease. Lucas studied her face as she worked. She wasn't just someone passing through. There was history in her stillness. Pain packed neatly behind reserve. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to her. Not romantically, not yet, but as someone who understood what it meant to lose something and keep standing. And before he could talk himself out of it, the words slipped out. "I'm going to a wedding this weekend. I'd like to have someone come with me. Would you?" Maya paused, pencil midline. "I don't do weddings," she said quietly. Lucas chuckled dryly. "Me either." She looked at him. Really looked at him. Then said, "If you're asking out of pity, I'll say no. If you're asking because you want a buffer between you and someone who hurt you, I might say yes." He grinned, the first honest one he'd had in days. "I'm asking because I don't want to show up alone to a room full of people who think I shouldn't have made it this far." Maya nodded slowly. "All right then, I'll come." And just like that, the wheels of fate turned. Neither of them knew the room they'd walk into would never forget what happened next. The next few days blurred past in small tasks and silent preparations. Lucas worked extra shifts, taking on a last-minute plumbing emergency in an old building downtown just to cover the gas money and a fresh pair of shoes for Emma, her first real flats with sparkles. She twirled in them at the thrift store mirror like they were glass slippers. He hadn't seen Maya again. Not at the church, not at the shelter line. She hadn't given him a number, and he hadn't asked. It was dumb, he thought, impulsive. What kind of man invites a stranger, someone who might be struggling herself, to a wedding filled with polished teeth and trust funds? But the moment haunted him. Her eyes, the way they didn't flinch when he told her the truth. Her posture proud, even in a borrowed coat. The castle she sketched that made Emma gasp. Lucas told himself if he didn't see her again, it was for the best. Simpler. Cleaner. No disappointments. That Friday afternoon, as he finished fixing a broken heater in the church basement, he walked upstairs and froze. She was there. Maya stood by the stained glass window talking quietly with Sister June, the volunteer coordinator. Emma spotted her first and ran across the hall like a beam of joy. "You came back!" The little girl shouted, her shoes clicking on the linoleum. Maya turned, surprised. She smiled gently, kneeling to eye level. "I said I might," she said softly. Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled drawing, a stick figure version of the castle Maya had made now, with 3 people drawn in front of it. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. Underneath was written in crooked purple letters, "Me, Daddy, you." Lucas approached, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I wasn't sure you'd show." "I said yes," she replied. "I meant it." He noticed she held a paper garment bag. Sister June smiled and handed him a box. "She'll need a proper pair of shoes," the older woman said. "Donated just yesterday. Your daughter told us you had a very important royal ball to attend." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Did she now?" Lucas scratched his neck, flushed. "She's got an imagination." Maya tilted her head. "No, she's got hope. There's a difference." The next evening, just before sunset, the sky over Napa turned a golden haze. The vineyard estate loomed like something out of a glossy bridal magazine. Wide stone steps, manicured hedges, string lights strung between wrought iron posts. Lucas pulled into the gravel driveway, heart thudding. The borrowed suit itched. The tie choked. Emma sat in the backseat, legs swinging, hands clutching her little silver purse like it held treasure. Maya stepped out of the passenger side like she belonged to another world. Her hair, now brushed and softly curled, caught the evening light. The navy blue dress from the church fit her like it had been made for her, simple and flowing, modest, yet unmistakably elegant. Her posture hadn't changed, still straight-backed, still composed, but her expression was harder to read. She looked like someone who had spent years learning how to disappear, and had just decided not to. Lucas stared, then caught himself. "You look... wow." She smiled politely. "Thank the church ladies. They know how to perform miracles with safety pins." Emma clambered out next. "Daddy, do you think they'll have cake?" Lucas cleared his throat. "Probably. Fancy cake, with too many flowers." As they walked toward the doors, guests in heels and suits glanced their way. Some nodded politely. Others stared longer. Inside the ballroom, all marble and chandeliers, Lucas spotted the usual suspects: lawyers in tailored suits, women in silk, people who never had to check price tags. Then he saw her. Vanessa. She was standing near the fountain centerpiece, radiant in a backless white satin gown. She turned, caught his eye, and froze for just a moment. Then her lips curved into a practiced smile. She leaned in to whisper something to Derek, who turned as well. Their expressions were identical, smug, expectant. Lucas felt the old weight returning, the feeling of being measured and found wanting. But then Emma slipped her hand into his, and Maya moved a step closer beside him. And suddenly he remembered why he came. Not for them. Not even for closure. But to show his daughter what it looks like to walk into a room that thinks less of you and still stand tall. Dinner was served. Polite chatter filled the air. Emma was given a booster seat and a plate of pasta shaped like bows. She beamed like royalty. Maya remained mostly quiet, but she observed everything: the way Vanessa checked her reflection in every glass surface, how Derek's laugh was always half a second louder than necessary, how the tablecloths were a shade too white, trying too hard to look effortless. Finally, as the best man took the mic to give his speech, Derek stood up and raised his glass. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," he began, voice-smooth, words rehearsed, "especially those who traveled far or climbed out of their comfort zones." His gaze drifted toward Lucas. "And some who, let's be honest, we never expected to show up looking so put together. Wow. Really." Laughter, polite, tight. Lucas stiffened. Maya's eyes narrowed. Derek continued. "They say love brings out the best in us. Or maybe it just reminds us of who we left behind. Either way, cheers." A louder laugh this time. Toasts clinked. Lucas reached for his water glass, jaw tight. Maya placed a hand on his arm. She whispered, "Not yet." He turned to her, surprised. "Timing," she murmured, eyes never leaving Derek. "Is everything." That night wasn't over, and neither was the story. Something had shifted. Not just in the air or in Lucas's resolve, but in Maya's stance and the way Emma looked at her, in the silent thread now connecting all three of them across that polished table. They had walked into the lion's den, but the real roar was still waiting, and this time it wouldn't come from the microphone. It would come from a woman who had once lost her voice and was ready to take it back. The ballroom shimmered under chandeliers that dripped crystals like frozen tears. A quartet played something elegant but lifeless background music for people who no longer listened to music but heard only their own voices. Waiters moved like shadows, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes that never seemed to empty. Lucas stood at the edge of the room, clutching his water glass like a shield. The scent of expensive perfume and aged wine made him nauseous, not because it was unpleasant, but because it reminded him of a life he'd once been, almost a part of a life Vanessa had stepped into effortlessly after stepping over him. He looked down at Emma. She was sitting perfectly still at the children's table, the only child there. Her sparkly shoes dangled above the floor, kicking softly to the rhythm of the music. In front of her, a cupcake with gold-dusted frosting sat untouched. She was drawing quietly on a linen napkin with a crayon she had snuck into her purse. Across the room, Vanessa was gliding between guests, glowing with practiced ease. She greeted people with the kind of warmth that came from years of networking, not affection. But every so often her gaze flicked back to Lucas and Maya, and each time her smile dimmed just a fraction. Maya hadn't moved from her seat. She sat straight, her expression unreadable. But her fingers traced the stem of her wine glass with precision, as if measuring her words before they ever reached her lips. "Why'd she invite you?" Maya asked, finally, her voice so soft he nearly missed it. Lucas kept his eyes on Vanessa. "She didn't think I'd come." "That's not a reason." He sighed. "Maybe she wanted to prove she won. Or maybe she just wanted to see if I was still the same guy she left stuck broke alone." "And are you Lucas?" met Maya's gaze. "No. But I used to be." Maya didn't smile, but something softened around her eyes. "She doesn't know what to do with the version of you that survived." That landed like truth. Heavy, sharp, and somehow healing. A new song began slower this time. Derek stepped onto the dance floor, pulling Vanessa with him. They moved like they'd rehearsed it. Flawless turns, perfect posture, the kind of couple people admired, envied, assumed, had it all. But Lucas noticed the space between them. They danced close but never touched hearts. Vanessa's smile was a mask. Derek's attention flicked to the crowd more than to his bride. Maya leaned toward Lucas, her voice lower. He checks who's watching more than he checks her. Lucas gave a small knowing laugh. He always did. She tilted her head. You knew him. We went to the same college, same dorm. He was the kind of guy who made you laugh, then made sure you remembered who owed who. And Vanessa chose him. She chose comfort, Lucas said, and a life where she didn't have to carry anyone else's burdens. Maya looked at Emma, who was now offering her cupcake to a server because it was too pretty to eat. She left more than you behind, Maya murmured. Lucas followed her gaze and nodded slowly. Yeah. A tap on Lucas's shoulder pulled him out of the moment. It was a woman in her 60s, silver hair twisted in a bun lipstick a few shades too bold for the occasion. Lucas Bennett. He turned. Yes, I'm Rachel, Vanessa's aunt. She smiled warmly. I just wanted to say, I don't know what happened back then, but I remember you being kind, thoughtful. My niece doesn't always make the best decisions when it comes to people. Lucas blinked. That's kind of you to say. She's built her life out of glass and mirrors, all shine, no substance. It looks solid until the right question hits it. Rachel gave him a squeeze on the arm and walked away, leaving him stunned. It was the first time anyone in Vanessa's circle had ever spoken to him like a human being since the breakup. He sat down next to Maya, who raised an eyebrow. Unexpected kindness. He nodded. Careful. That's the kind that sneaks up and stays. The MC tapped the mic, and now he announced a few words from our groom, Derek Hale. The room quieted as Derek stepped up, wine glass in hand, confidence oozing from every pore. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. Thank you for being here on this perfect day. Perfect venue, perfect bride. He smiled at Vanessa. And perfect company. He let that hang in the air just long enough. I'd especially like to welcome a few unexpected guests. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? His eyes locked onto Lucas. Old friends we never thought we'd see again showing up in their Sunday best with equally surprising +1s. Some people chuckled, not kindly. Lucas didn't move. Maya didn't blink. Derek went on. But that's the thing about weddings. They remind us of where we've been and who we're glad we left behind. There were more laughs this time. Louder. Colder. Emma looked up, confused. Daddy, why is that man talking like that? Lucas opened his mouth, but Maya stood. Just stood. The movement was small, but in a room full of people seated and sipping, it was thunder. She placed her napkin on her plate, smoothed her dress, and looked directly at Derek with eyes that could freeze fire. "You've said enough," she said calmly. The room went still. Derek blinked. "Excuse me." Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You don't get to mock people just because they didn't fit into your picture-perfect life. That says more about your shallowness than their worth. A few gasps. Rachel in the back smiled faintly. Maya turned to Vanessa. "And you had something rare. You gave it away. That's your right, but don't pretend what you replaced it with is anything but hollow." Then she sat back down, serene as ever. Lucas sat in stunned silence. The room buzzed like a struck bell. Vanessa looked pale. Derek looked like someone had slapped the cocktail out of his hand. Emma whispered, "She's really brave." Lucas swallowed. "No," he whispered back. "She's just really honest." And for the first time that night, Lucas felt something unfamiliar wash over him. Pride. Not just in Maya, but in himself for standing next to someone who saw value not in wealth or appearances, but in truth. And maybe he was beginning to see it too. The clinking of glasses was slower now. The champagne no longer bubbled with joy, but with tension. Conversations dipped into murmurs as though everyone had agreed silently and simultaneously to pretend that Maya's words hadn't hit like a silent explosion. Lucas sat heart-pounding in his ears, watching Derek fumble for his composure. The groom gave a tight smile and muttered something into the mic that no one really heard before handing it off like it burned him. Vanessa hadn't moved. She stood frozen beside the head table, fingers clenching the stem of her wine glass like it might anchor her to the polished floor. Her eyes flickered between Lucas and Maya, something unreadable darkening their surface. And then, like a trained performer on cue, she turned and walked away from the dance floor. Not in a dramatic stomp, not in tears, but quietly, gracefully. The kind of retreat that said, "I need a moment, not I, surrender." Yet something in her exit left a hole behind. Lucas took a breath, shoulders tense. "Should we go?" Maya asked, her voice even. He shook his head slowly. "No, not yet." She nodded. "Good, because I'm not done watching this house of mirrors." He glanced at her, the calm in her eyes, not arrogance but clarity. She wasn't here to wound. She was here to reveal. Emma returned to the table with a napkin-wrapped cookie face lit with the innocent joy of someone oblivious to adult tension. She climbed into Lucas's lap. "Daddy," she said, "people are acting weird. But this cookie tastes like Christmas." Lucas smiled faintly and kissed her head. "I think that's the best thing anyone said all night." Maya leaned slightly toward them, resting her arms on the table. "She has no idea how much better she makes this room just by being here." Lucas looked at her. "Neither do you." For a moment their eyes held, and in that silence, surrounded by expensive centerpieces and forced elegance, something unspoken passed between them, a mutual understanding. They didn't belong here, and yet somehow they were becoming the most real part of this entire illusion. Later, during the dinner service, Lucas slipped away to stretch his legs. He walked the vineyard path behind the ballroom, the smell of lavender and dry soil grounding him. Moonlight filtered through the trellises, brushing the vines with silver. He leaned on a wooden post, staring at the horizon. The hills rolled softly like folded blankets, quiet and untouched by the mess of human pride happening just yards away. "Do you remember this place?" a voice said behind him. He turned. Vanessa. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her expression neutral, neither hostile nor warm. "I do," he replied. "It hasn't changed much," she said. Lucas studied her for a long moment. "But we have." She laughed once short and sharp. "You used to say we'd buy a little house on a vineyard one day, run it ourselves." He smiled dry. "And have chickens." She smirked. "You insisted the chickens would have names." Princess Cluck, he recalled. Emma still uses that name when she draws birds. A beat of silence. Then she looked away into the night. You look good, Lucas. Stronger. He didn't respond. She went on. I didn't invite you to humiliate you. He raised an eyebrow. No. Then what was that note supposed to be? A joke. I was curious, she admitted. Curious if you were still stuck. If I'd made the right decision. Lucas let the words hang for a moment. You didn't. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me, I wasn't the one who stayed stuck, Vanessa. You left when life got hard, and that's fine. People walk away. But don't stand here pretending you didn't want to see me fail. Because you did. Her jaw tensed. She didn't deny it. I didn't think you'd bring someone like her, she said quietly. Neither did I, he replied honestly. She's not what I expected. She's not what I expected, he repeated softer. She's more. Vanessa looked down. Do you love her? He hesitated. I don't know yet, but she sees me, and that's more than I can say for anyone else here tonight. For the first time, Vanessa looked small, tired, a little lost. I thought I needed someone who could protect me from failure, she whispered. Turns out I needed someone who could walk through it with me, but by the time I realized that, Lucas nodded, finishing for her. I wasn't yours anymore. She gave a sad smile. Tell Emma I'm proud of how you raised her. Then she turned and walked back toward the light and laughter of the ballroom alone. When Lucas returned to the table, Maya was seated with Emma leaning against her shoulder, eyes closed, cookie crumbs still clinging to her fingers. She didn't last through dessert, Maya said softly. Lucas sat down. She's had enough of the fake fairy tale. Maya glanced at him. And you? He looked across the room, then at her. I think the real story is just beginning. She gave him a look guarded, almost challenging. I'm not a storybook ending, Lucas. He leaned forward, voice steady. Neither am I. But maybe. We're a second chapter. Maya didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. And in that long, silent exchange between a man who had once been abandoned and a woman who had once vanished into grief, something rooted itself deep. Not romance, not rescue, not illusion, but something far rarer, recognition. In a ballroom full of noise and surface glitter, two people who had every reason to hide had just begun to step into something real. Not perfect, but honest. And, finally, enough. The clatter of silverware and the clinking of glasses had settled into a strange kind of stillness. The band resumed playing, but their notes seemed thinner, like background noise in a scene that had already changed. Lucas sat quietly, Emma now curled into his lap, her fingers tangled around his tie. Her breathing had slowed, her cupcake napkin discarded, her sparkly shoes kicked off beneath the table. He kissed the top of her head gently, letting her warmth steady him. Across the room, Derek moved stiffly like a marionette whose strings had tangled. Vanessa hadn't returned from their conversation, and despite the polite laughter resuming at various tables, a new energy filled the space. Unease, anticipation, something just beneath the surface waiting to break. Maya hadn't said another word since returning to her seat, but her presence beside him, composed, quiet, charged, was enough to tilt the room. Lucas turned to her. That was necessary, she said without looking at him. He nodded. You just called out a room full of people who haven't been questioned in years. I didn't come here to play nice Lucas, she replied, voice calm. I came here because you asked, and I don't let my presence be ornamental. Lucas stared at her. You never could be. The MC returned to the mic. His voice wavered for the first time all night. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll indulge us, the bride would like to say a few words. All heads turned. Vanessa had reappeared. She walked slowly to the center of the room, her satin gown trailing behind her like a train of ghosts. Her posture was perfect, her face unreadable, but her eyes were different, calmer, stripped of pretense. She took the mic, held it with two hands. I had a speech written, she began, voice clear but low. Something about love and growth and fate. But tonight, something unexpected happened. She paused, glanced at Lucas, and then deliberately at Maya. I saw someone speak with more honesty in 1 minute than I've seen in years from anyone in this circle, myself included. People shifted. Some froze mid-bite. I didn't invite Lucas here to celebrate him. If I'm honest, I invited him to measure him. I thought I had grown and that he had not. I thought I had escaped the burden of struggle. But the truth is... She turned fully to face Lucas now. He didn't fail me. I failed him. I left when things got hard. I told myself he was holding me back. But what he was really doing was caring more than anyone should have to, including me. Lucas swallowed his throat tight, and Maya Vanessa said, her voice trembling, just slightly. I don't know your story, but I know bravery when I see it. You reminded me tonight that dignity isn't about status or reputation. It's about truth. And I owe both of you something I should have given years ago: respect. She handed the mic back. No music played, no applause followed. Just silence. Heavy, thoughtful silence. And then a slow clap. It came from Vanessa's Aunt Rachel near the back. Firm, unapologetic. It grew 1, then 2, then a handful, until nearly half the room stood and clapped, not just for what was said, but for what was finally faced. Vanessa returned to her seat without fanfare. Maya looked at Lucas, her lips pressed into a small, unreadable smile. I didn't expect that. Neither did I, he admitted. But maybe that was her first real gift. Outside, the vineyard had grown darker. The last of the light dipped below the hills, casting long shadows over the gravel walkways. The air smelled of rosemary and dust and distant rain. Maya stepped away from the crowd, heels crunching softly as she walked toward the trellis near the edge of the vineyard. Lucas followed a few paces behind. She stopped beneath the arch of climbing ivy and turned to him. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, she said. You should know that. I know. But when that man spoke like your life was something to be pitied... She paused. I saw myself 5 years ago, sitting in a room I didn't belong in, watching people measure my worth by what I'd lost. Lucas stepped closer. What did you lose? Maya? She looked away. My son, Jacob. He was 7. Lucas inhaled sharply. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said quietly. He had a heart condition, one we thought we could manage. We were wrong. After that, my husband left. I quit my job at the university. I disappeared from the life I'd built. It was easier to be unseen than to be reminded of what had been ripped away. Lucas's voice was soft. And now I'm learning to breathe again, one step at a time. And somehow, this ridiculous invitation you got felt like a doorway I wasn't expecting. One I didn't want, but maybe needed. Lucas nodded slowly, then looked her in the eye. I didn't bring you here to be a symbol, or a shield. I didn't even know why I asked you, really. But now, I think I brought you because you remind me what surviving looks like when it turns into living again. Maya's throat worked. You don't need me to rescue you, Lucas. No, he said, stepping even closer. But maybe I want you to walk beside me while I rescue myself. They stood in silence under the canopy of stars, not kissing, not reaching, just standing close enough that their breaths began to fall into the same rhythm. From behind them, a small voice called out, Daddy. They turned. Emma stood barefoot in the grass, holding her shoes in one hand and Maya's sketchbook in the other. I drew something, she said, holding the pad up. Lucas took it and flipped it open. Inside was a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures standing in front of the castle Maya had sketched days before. One tall, one medium, one small. Above it, in purple crayon, was a single line, Us. Not fancy, just forever. Maya covered her mouth, eyes wet. Emma looked up at her. You can come in our forever, too, if you want. And for the first time in years, maybe since the moment she lost Jacob, Maya let herself say the word aloud again. Yes. She bent down and pulled Emma into her arms. And in that quiet, grape-scented night with stars above and old wounds behind, something new began. Not loudly, not perfectly, but undeniably. A second chance. Built not from ashes but from truth, tenderness, and the fierce kind of love that refuses to let the broken parts win. The drive home from the vineyard was quiet, but not heavy. Emma slept peacefully in the back seat, her little head tilted against her car seat, mouth slightly open. One hand still gripped Maya's old sketchbook as if afraid it would disappear with the dream. Lucas kept his eyes on the road, the soft glow of the dashboard washing over his face, but his thoughts were nowhere near the winding curves of Highway 12. His mind was still on the vineyard, on Maya's words, Vanessa's unexpected confession, and the ripple effect a single act of honesty had left behind. Maya sat beside him, her bare feet tucked under her heels, long discarded. She hadn't spoken since they'd pulled out of the parking lot, but her silence didn't feel distant. It felt reflective. She finally broke it with a whisper. "You handled tonight with more grace than most people ever manage with a script." Lucas gave a small laugh. "I was trying not to spill water on my shirt." She smiled, looking out the window. "Still, you didn't flinch. Not when he mocked you. Not when Vanessa admitted what she did. You stood there like you knew who you were." He nodded slowly, because for the first time, "I think I do." She turned to face him fully. "Say it. Say who you are." Lucas hesitated. The windshield wipers clicked once. "I'm a single dad who still forgets school picture days, who can't always afford brand-name cereal, who works too many jobs and falls asleep reading bedtime stories. But I'm also the guy who stayed when everything fell apart. I stayed." Maya's throat moved as she swallowed. Her voice came out raw. "That matters." "It's the only thing that matters," Lucas said. Back at the house, Lucas carried Emma in from the car. She stirred briefly, but settled back to sleep the moment her head hit the pillow. He pulled the blanket over her gently, then turned to find Maya standing in the doorway of the small living room, arms crossed. "This place is real," she said. "Lived in. Like nothing's trying too hard." Lucas smiled faintly. "That's a poetic way of saying the paint's chipped and the faucet leaks." "I like chipped paint," she said. "It means someone used to laugh here." She stepped further inside, running her hand along the edge of a shelf filled with mismatched books and Emma's crayon drawings tacked to the wall. Lucas watched her quietly. "You don't have to stay." "I know," she said. "But you can," he added. She turned to him, the soft light from the kitchen catching the side of her face. "Lucas, tonight was beautiful. It was healing even. But I still don't know if I fit into your story." "You're not a plot twist, Maya," he said gently. "You're part of the reason it turned around." She looked at the floor. "I haven't been anyone's part in a long time." Lucas crossed the room, stopped just in front of her. "Then, let this be the first place you're not invisible." Maya didn't cry, but her eyes shimmered. The next morning, sunlight flooded through the curtains, warming the worn hardwood floors and the single coffee mug Lucas had set on the table. Maya stood at the window, sipping from it, wrapped in one of his old flannel shirts. Emma sat cross-legged on the couch, watching morning cartoons with a bowl of dry cereal and her sketchbook on her lap. "Can we go to the park today?" Emma asked, turning around. Lucas, still pulling on his boots, nodded. "If we finish folding laundry first." Emma groaned dramatically but smiled. Maya watched the exchange, a strange ache blooming behind her ribs, the kind that comes not from pain, but from watching something so gentle you're not sure if you deserve to touch it. "Do you ever get used to it?" she asked quietly. "Used to what?" "This, quiet love, slow mornings, no pretending." Lucas looked up. "You don't get used to it. You grow into it." She sat beside him, hands cupped around the mug. "What if I mess it up?" He chuckled. "Then you're human. We'll clean it up together. Later at the park, Emma darted through the grass chasing pigeons while Lucas and Maya sat on a bench in the shade. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and sunscreen, and the sound of kids laughing surrounded them. "She's different around you," Maya said. Lucas raised a brow. "Emma?" She nodded. "Calmer. More herself. Like she doesn't have to fight to be noticed. She's always been that way with people who don't treat her like a footnote," he said. "You didn't see a child. You saw her." Maya hesitated. "I lost Jacob on a Tuesday." Lucas gently placed his hand over hers. "I don't talk about him much," she continued, "because most people look at me with eyes full of pity or discomfort. You didn't." "I've lost people too," he said. "Maybe not the same way, but enough to know grief doesn't disappear. It just changes shape." She turned toward him, her voice softer. "I think I could love her." Lucas's heart thudded once hard, and maybe she added in time, "I could love you too." He didn't say anything right away, just reached into his pocket and pulled out the small napkin sketch Emma had made the night before the three of them in front of Maya's castle. "I already do," he said quietly. The wind rustled the trees. Emma's laughter rang out again as she ran back toward them, arms wide like wings. And for the first time in a very long time, all three of them were exactly where they were supposed to be. Not perfect, not healed, but present. And building something that mattered one honest, ordinary, miraculous moment at a time. The following days settled into a rhythm so gentle it felt borrowed from another life. Mornings with cereal and cartoons, afternoons with errands or impromptu art projects, evenings spent laughing at Emma's bedtime stories, all tethered together by a warmth Lucas hadn't known he was missing until it was there, brushing his shoulders like sunlight through a cracked window. Maya stayed, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but quietly, almost imperceptibly, she became part of the air in the house. She never imposed. She cooked, sometimes folded a basket of laundry once read to Emma from a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. But she also disappeared into herself, occasionally sitting near the window with her sketch pad lost in thought, the pencil dancing over the page with a mix of precision and pain. Lucas never interrupted her. He knew what healing looked like. It didn't come in declarations or dramatic turns. It came in stillness, in being allowed to exist without expectation. One evening, as golden light poured through the slats of the blinds, Lucas came into the living room and found Emma kneeling beside Maya, who was sketching again. Emma leaned her chin on Maya's shoulder. "Can I see?" Maya hesitated, then turned the pad around. On the page was a drawing of a small house with uneven shutters and a crooked mailbox. In front of it stood three figures, a man with strong shoulders and kind eyes, a little girl with bouncing curls, and a woman whose smile was quiet but present. Emma gasped, "That's us." Maya looked down. "Yes. You made me look like a real princess." "You are one," Maya whispered. Emma tilted her head. "Did you always draw?" "Yes." Even when you were sad, Maya's voice was barely audible, especially then. Emma reached for the pencil. "Can I add something?" Maya nodded and handed it over. Emma drew a heart above the three figures. Then, in her scrawled handwriting, she wrote, "Love lives here." Maya stared at the page. Her breath caught in her throat. She closed the sketch pad slowly and said almost to herself, "I used to think I'd never hear something like that again." Lucas, watching from the hallway, felt something shift in his chest. Not just emotion, but a deep, anchoring certainty. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep with her drawing tucked under her pillow, Lucas and Maya stood outside on the small porch, the cool air brushing against their arms. The sky was clear. Stars blinked down on them like quiet witnesses. Lucas handed Maya a cup of tea. She accepted it wordlessly. He broke the silence first. "She's different around you. More centered. Happier." Maya smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I don't know how to be her mother, Lucas." "You don't have to be," he said gently. "You just have to show up." She looked at him. What if I fail her? You won't, he said, because the only thing you need to give her is what you already are. Maya blinked, which is present, steady, real. She looked away. I wasn't real for a long time. I was a shadow, a ghost of the woman I used to be. Lucas took a deep breath. You're not a ghost anymore. She turned back to him. And what about you? He hesitated. I spent so long being in survival mode I forgot what it felt like to be seen. Not for what I could provide or fix, but just seen. You feel seen now. He looked into her eyes. I do. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Then Maya said, There's something I haven't told you. Lucas didn't move. Okay, I had a son. You know that, but you don't know I still talk to him. In my mind when I draw, when I'm scared. I ask him what he thinks. Lucas's eyes softened. And what does he say? She smiled faintly. He tells me to stop hiding. Lucas stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. Then let me say what he would. We're not asking you to be perfect, just to be with us. That's enough. Maya closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, they shimmered, but not with pain. With something else. Something whole. The next morning, Lucas woke to the smell of cinnamon. He walked into the kitchen to find Maya at the stove. Emma sitting at the table with a big grin. Guess what Emma said? What Lucas asked. I asked Maya to teach me how to draw people. And she said, yes. Lucas glanced at Maya. She smiled over her shoulder. She's got the hand for it. Better than I was at her age. Emma beamed. Lucas made himself coffee and sat down watching them move Maya flipping pancakes, Emma sketching beside her. There was no soundtrack, no grand announcement of healing. Just the clatter of forks, the smell of breakfast, and a quiet rightness that filled the space like light. When Maya sat beside him, he reached for her hand under the table and squeezed. No words, just presence. They didn't need to say it. The promise had already been drawn, not in ink, but in belonging. That afternoon, while Emma napped, Lucas found Maya sitting on the porch with her sketch pad again. He sat beside her. What are you drawing today? She turned the page toward him. It was a castle, the same one she'd drawn weeks ago under the sycamore tree at the shelter. But this one was different. The lines were more defined. The windows glowed with golden light. And at the top in her elegant script she'd written a place called Enough. Lucas looked at her. You've built something here, she said. With love, with struggle, with truth. And I want to live in that kind of castle. You already do, he said. And for the first time she believed him. Not because he said it, but because for once she could feel it. The sunlight had begun its late afternoon slide across the living room floor when Lucas's phone vibrated on the counter. He was rinsing dishes, sleeves rolled up the soft hum of a cartoon drifting from the television where Emma sprawled across the rug with her sketchbook and stuffed rabbit. He glanced at the screen. Vanessa Langston. The name made his stomach tighten not from anger that had burned out long ago, but from a quiet unease. After everything at the wedding, after the speech and the truth laid bare under chandeliers and tension. Why now? He looked over at Maya, who was sitting on the couch beside Emma reading, silently but alert. She didn't glance up, but Lucas sensed she knew as though her stillness had suddenly sharpened. He answered. Hello, hi. Vanessa's voice was calm but thinner than usual. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Neither was I. A pause. I just wanted to talk. If you have a minute. Lucas stepped into the hallway, shutting the door gently behind him. Go ahead. Another pause, then a slow exhale. I wanted to thank you for not tearing me apart. You could have, and maybe you would have been justified, but you didn't. I didn't show up to punish anyone. Vanessa, he said. I showed up for my daughter, and for myself. I know she replied, and I saw that, That's what shook me the most. Lucas leaned against the wall listening. I was wrong, Lucas, she continued. About so much. About you. About what matters. I thought I wanted power and polish, but it's hollow. Derek, he cut in gently. I don't need to know. Vanessa hesitated. I know, but you deserve to. He's already left. 3 days after the wedding. Said he needed space. Said I had emotional baggage. Lucas closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I'm not, she said softly. It was overdue. Silence. Then Vanessa said, Lucas, I need to ask something. Not for me. For her. It took him a moment to realize she meant Emma. Go on, he said carefully. I saw how Maya looks at her, she said. How Emma leans into her like she's always been there. That connection doesn't come easy, not with kids who've seen what Emma has. Lucas said nothing, but the truth pressed at his chest. She was right. She's special, Vanessa said. And Maya is too. I don't know her story, but I saw in her the kind of strength I never learned to carry. There was a pause, not awkward, but full of reckoning. I don't want to come back into your life, Lucas, she said finally. But I needed you to know. I see it now. Everything I missed. You didn't break after I left. You built. And I was too small to see the kind of man that takes. Lucas breathed in slowly. Thank you. He could hear the relief in her voice. Take care of her. Both of them. I will. Then the line went dead. He returned to the living room quietly. Maya looked up from her book but didn't speak. Her expression was neutral calm. Lucas met her eyes, then knelt beside Emma and stroked her hair. Hey, sunshine. Emma looked up. Daddy, guess what? What Maya showed me how to shade a dress so it looks shiny, like a real princess one. He smiled. That's amazing. Maya stood slowly closing the book. Everything okay? Lucas nodded. That was Vanessa. She just wanted closure. I think she finally found some. Maya's expression shifted just slightly to something unreadable. Then she said, Good. Lucas stood and took her hand. And I told her something else. What's that? That I'm going to take care of you. Both of you. Maya looked down. You don't have to say that. I want to say it, he replied, because it's true. That night after Emma had fallen asleep, Lucas and Maya sat outside again, the same old porch, now feeling like the front step of something bigger. He handed her a mug of tea. She accepted it without a word. I think she was scared, he said. Vanessa. He nodded. Scared she'd made the wrong life. Scared it was too late to say so. Maya looked up at the stars. That's the hardest kind of fear, the kind that comes after the damage. I used to think closure meant forgiveness, Lucas said. Now I think it just means finally seeing things clearly and letting go. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I've been wondering lately if my son would recognize me now, if I'm still his mother after all I've lost. Lucas turned to her, voice firm but gentle. You didn't stop being his mother when he died, Maya. You've been carrying him in every line you draw and every step you've taken since. You carry him into every room you enter. Her lips trembled. She nodded. Some days I feel that. Some days I just feel empty. He reached over and took her hand. You're not empty. You're becoming again. Maya blinked back tears. You really believe people can start over? I don't believe it, he said. I'm living it. She let out a shaky breath. You make it sound so simple. It's not, he admitted, but it's worth it. They stayed like that until the tea went cold and the sky deepened. Before heading in, Maya touched his arm. Lucas. Yeah. If I fall apart again someday, I'll hold the pieces, he said, and we'll build something new. She smiled, a real one. The kind that didn't hide pain, but included it. The kind that promised tomorrow might be softer than yesterday. And in the dark, under a quiet sky, they stepped inside not as broken people needing fixing, but as healing people building something quietly beautiful. Something real. Something whole. The evening air was heavy with summer, not oppressive, but alive. The kind of warm that made the breeze feel like a secret being passed from tree to tree. Lucas had opened the windows earlier, letting the scent of grass and honeysuckle drift in. Somewhere in the neighborhood, kids were laughing, a sprinkler ticking rhythmically, and someone's old radio playing soft jazz. Emma sat on the front steps, barefoot in her pajamas, chin on her knees. In her lap was the sketchbook Maya had given her, now almost half full of castles, animals, and people who looked suspiciously like Lucas and Maya, but always with a little heart drawn somewhere nearby. Maya stepped outside holding 2 mason jars. Inside each one, a battery-operated tea light glowed softly. "What are those?" For Emma asked, eyes wide. Maya sat beside her. "Firefly jars. But they're not real fireflies." "No," Maya said, "but they're for catching the real ones." Lucas, watching from the doorway, smiled as Emma clutched one of the jars with both hands and looked out across the lawn. "Do you think they'll come?" "They always do," Maya said, "especially when you stop chasing and just sit still." Emma nodded solemnly, then stood up and walked barefoot onto the grass, her eyes scanning the darkening yard. Lucas came to sit next to Maya on the step. "You always know what she needs." Maya didn't look at him. "I just listen." He studied her profile, the way the fading light caught the soft edge of her cheek, the tired but peaceful calm in her eyes. "You ever wonder," he asked quietly, "how something so painful brought us here?" Maya turned to him. "I used to believe life was either punishment or reward. But now, I think it's just invitation. Over and over again. Even the hardest parts. To what? To love. To rebuild. To choose gentleness even after the world's been anything but." Lucas swallowed. Her words weren't just pretty. They were lived in. Earned. And every time she spoke like that, he fell a little further into something he hadn't dared believe he'd feel again, home. Across the lawn, Emma suddenly gasped and pointed toward the hedges. "There, I saw one." She darted barefoot across the yard, her little figure lit by the porch glow. Lucas laughed standing. "I better go spot her before she ends up in the neighbor's rose bushes." Maya watched him jog after Emma, his laughter carrying across the yard like it belonged there. And maybe for the first time in her life she felt like she belonged in a moment, just like this, ordinary and golden. A minute later, Lucas returned Emma, giggling in his arms, holding her jar up triumphantly. "I got one," she declared. Lucas grinned. "I told her it was just a porch light reflection." Emma rolled her eyes. "Daddy, don't ruin the magic." Maya stood and took Emma's free hand. "He won't, I promise." Together, the 3 of them moved toward the middle of the yard. Maya set her jar down on the grass. Lucas followed suit. They sat in a loose triangle, legs crossed, Emma in the middle. And then it happened. A tiny flicker. Then another, like stars being shaken loose from the trees. "Fireflies," Emma whispered. They danced through the air, slow, golden pulses of light weaving through the dusk. Emma gasped, with each one spinning her jar gently but never trying to trap them. Maya watched, her heart full. "She's light," she whispered to Lucas. "She doesn't even know it, but she is." Lucas looked over. "Neither do you." Maya turned. "What if I mess this up?" He didn't answer right away. Just picked up the sketchbook Emma had left on the porch step and opened to a recent page, a castle again, but this time there were no stick figures. Just an open door, glowing windows, and stars above. "She drew this last night," he said. "I asked her where the people were, and she said, 'They're already inside. That's why the lights are on.'" Maya's throat tightened. "You don't have to build the whole thing in one day," Lucas said softly. "Just walk through the door. We're already there." She nodded once, slowly. Then Emma crawled into her lap, completely unprompted, and rested her head against Maya's chest. "You smell like crayons and tea," the little girl murmured. Maya laughed quietly. "Is that good? It's perfect," Emma said. Lucas leaned back on his elbows, watching them. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something bad to happen. The shoes had already dropped. The worst had already come. What was left this quiet, firefly-lit night was not luck. It was grace, earned by staying, built by kindness, sustained by love. As bedtime neared, they walked Emma upstairs, her steps slow-jar, still glowing faintly. She kissed Maya's cheek before curling into her blanket. "Will you still be here in the morning?" she asked, eyes half closed. Maya smoothed her hair. "Yes, baby, I'll be here." Downstairs, Maya stood in the kitchen staring at the still jars, now dim. Lucas came behind her and gently rested a hand on her back. "She's not afraid anymore," he said. Maya turned emotion trembling behind her voice. "Neither am I." Lucas hesitated. "I know we haven't said it, and maybe it's too soon. Maybe the words don't even matter yet. But I need you to know." She silenced him with a hand on his chest. "You don't have to say it," she whispered. "I already feel it." Then she leaned in and rested her forehead against his. No kiss, no music swelling, just breath shared in silence. Two people who had walked through storms and silence and grief and found not perfection, but presence. And that was more than enough. Outside in the yard, one last firefly blinked once more as if to confirm love lives here. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting gold across the floor of the modest kitchen. Pancakes sizzled on the skillet. The smell of cinnamon and browned butter drifted into the hallway. Maya stood barefoot at the stove, her hair loosely braided, wearing one of Lucas's soft flannel shirts that hung almost to her knees. Lucas sat at the table with Emma helping her spread peanut butter on a pancake shaped like a star. "Do you think real princesses eat pancakes?" Emma asked, licking her spoon. "I think the smart ones do," Lucas replied. Emma giggled. "Then Maya must be a princess." Maya turned her head just enough to smile, but there was something quieter in her face today. Something reflective. When breakfast was over, Emma excused herself to the living room, dragging her sketchbook and a pile of markers behind her like loyal pets. Lucas poured 2 mugs of coffee and brought one to Maya, who had stepped out onto the small back porch. The morning was cool fresh with the scent of dew and damp grass. He handed her the mug and sat beside her. "You okay?" he asked. Maya took a slow sip. "Yeah, I've been thinking." Lucas waited. She looked at him, voice low. "You know what the hardest question in the world is?" He shook his head. "It's not, 'Do you love me?' It's not even, 'Will you stay?'" She paused. "It's, 'Can I love again without betraying the people I lost?'" Lucas's heart sank a little, but he didn't interrupt. Maya went on, eyes trained on the tree line. "When I hold Emma's hand, part of me wonders if Jacob would have liked her, if he would have been protective or annoyed or shared his crayons. And when I laugh, I feel guilty, like I'm stealing joy from a world that buried him." Lucas reached for her hand. "You're not stealing anything." "But it feels like I am," she said, her voice cracking, "because part of me is still in that hospital room, still watching monitors go flat, still begging God or fate or whoever to take me instead." Tears slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe them. Lucas moved closer. "Maya." Grief doesn't ask permission. It moves in and paints your walls and redefines your silence. But healing, that comes with choice, and you've been choosing every single day. "I'm afraid if I choose this," she gestured vaguely toward the house. "The yard, him, then I'm closing the door on him." "No," Lucas said, voice firm now. "You're opening the door to carry him forward. You're not replacing him. You're expanding who you are because he existed." Maya covered her face with her hands, sobbing now, quiet, trembling, but not collapsing. Lucas waited. He didn't try to fix it. He knew better. He just stayed beside her. When the tears slowed, she lowered her hands. "I haven't let anyone hold me when I cried. Not since that day." He nodded. "Then let this be the first time." He pulled her gently into his arms. She rested her head on his chest and let herself be still. No words, just presence. After a long while, Maya pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. "I don't know how to be a mother again," she whispered. "Not really." Lucas shook his head softly. "You don't have to be. You just have to love her the way you already do. The rest, that's just detail." Maya searched his face. "You really believe that I believe in what I see. And what I see is a woman who has already taught Emma more about love, resilience, and tenderness than most people learn in a lifetime." Maya smiled through her tears. "That's the kind of thing people say in movies." He shrugged. "Maybe. But it's true here." Later that day, they walked with Emma to the neighborhood bookstore for story time. Emma skipped ahead, her curly hair bouncing as she pointed out flowers and street art along the sidewalk. Maya's hand found Lucas's instinctively. "How did your heart stay open after everything? I'm not sure it ever did," he admitted. "It just stayed soft enough for one more try." She laughed quietly. "That's the most honest answer I've ever heard." Inside the bookstore, Emma darted to the children's section, already calling dibs on the beanbag by the mural wall. Maya wandered to the art shelf. Lucas followed a moment later and saw her holding a hardcover sketchbook, the kind with thick pages and a canvas cover. She turned to him. "Can I get this?" "For her." He smiled. "She'd love that." "She's good, you know," Maya added. "Not just for her age. She has instinct." Lucas leaned closer. "She gets that from you." Maya looked down, touched, but still hesitant. "Maybe." He placed a hand gently on her back. "You're allowed to be part of her life, not just as a guest, but as someone who matters." Maya closed her eyes, letting that sink in. That night, as they tucked Emma in, she reached for Maya's hand instead of Lucas's. "Will you stay tonight?" Emma asked, blinking sleepily. Maya brushed the hair from her forehead. "Of course. And tomorrow?" "Yes." And the next day, Maya hesitated for a beat, then whispered, "As long as you want me." Emma grinned. "I want you forever." Lucas, standing at the doorway, caught Maya's eyes. She looked like someone standing in the center of a question finally answered, not by certainty but by love. After Emma drifted to sleep, they stepped into the hallway. Lucas took a breath, then asked, "And you, Maya?" tilted her head. "What do you mean? How long will you stay?" She didn't answer right away. Then slowly, with the calm certainty of someone no longer running from grief, she said, "As long as you'll have me." Lucas exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Forever," then he said. And this time, she didn't flinch. She simply nodded and stayed. The morning was quiet, just the way Lucas liked it. No alarm clocks, no rushed footsteps, just the soft shuffle of Emma's slippers across the wooden floor and the gentle clink of a spoon stirring oatmeal. Outside, the air held the crispness of early fall cool, but touched by light. Leaves had begun to turn gold and red, brushing the trees like fire that didn't burn. The porch was scattered with pumpkins from the local farm stand, and a paper banner reading, "Love Lives Here," fluttered across the front railing, scrawled in Emma's handwriting. Today wasn't ordinary. It felt like a page being turned not with drama, but with quiet intention. In the small garden behind the house, Lucas was straightening the folding chairs. Only a dozen guests were coming, friends from the neighborhood, a few kind souls from the church Sister June with her famous molasses cookies, and of course Aunt Rachel, who insisted on bringing real cloth napkins because love deserves linen. The whole ceremony had cost less than a weekend in Napa, but it was perfect. Not despite its simplicity, but because of it. Maya stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, hair pinned loosely with a few wild strands falling beside her cheeks. She wore a soft, cream-colored dress that wasn't new but had been carefully pressed and altered by a seamstress who understood stories more than fashion. She looked at Lucas and smiled. "I still can't believe you're the one who asked me," she said, teasing. "I never asked," he replied with a grin. "You just stayed." Maya laughed. "True, but you did fold 100 paper cranes." Lucas chuckled. "Only because Emma said you were the kind of woman who deserved magic." "She's right." They both turned as Emma burst out of the door wearing a pale blue dress and a crown made of dried flowers. In one hand she held a sketchbook now nearly full. In the other, a small pouch of lavender to toss down the aisle. "Daddy Maya," she called. "The guests are here." Maya bent down, her voice soft. "Are you ready?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I've practiced all morning. Sister June said I'm the most important part because I get to walk in front and set the joy." Maya smiled. "You already do." The ceremony began as the sun peeked through the trees, casting dappled light over the chairs. Emma walked ahead, sprinkling dried lavender like fairy dust, beaming with every step. Her joy was so unfiltered, so wide-eyed, it made more than one guest misty-eyed. Lucas stood at the makeshift altar, two wooden beams draped in white linen tied with wildflowers as Maya approached hand in hand with Emma. There was no organ music, no dramatic pause. Just heartbeats and breeze. When Maya reached him, she took his hands with steady fingers. The officiant, a kind woman from the community center, kept her words simple. "Today isn't about starting over," she said. "It's about continuing what's already begun, a story built from threads of healing, kindness, and choice." Maya looked into Lucas's eyes. "I don't have perfect words," she said softly, "but I have truth. You never asked me to be more than I am. You let me be broken. Then you showed me I wasn't. And now, I want to build every ordinary day with you, because ordinary with you is the most sacred thing I've ever known." Lucas swallowed, voice thick. "I once thought love had to be earned, that I had to be more richer, smarter, stronger before someone could stay. But you taught me that presence is enough, that who we are as we are is already worthy, and I promise to protect that truth. For you, for Emma, for whatever comes next." Emma sniffled loudly. "This is so happy." Everyone laughed, and then they kissed, not a movie kiss, not dramatic or choreographed, but a quiet, reverent kiss that felt like home. The reception was a picnic in the backyard. Folding tables draped in hand-me-down, lace-mismatched plates, homemade food brought by everyone who loved them. Kids played tag around the garden. Maya's sketchbook was passed from hand to hand, filled with drawings that told the whole story from the first day at the shelter to the castle titled Enough. At one point, Emma stood on a chair holding up a picture she'd drawn that morning. "This is our forever house," she announced. "It has pancakes, art hugs, and no yelling, and when people visit, they have to bring stories." Aunt Rachel wiped her eyes. "That's the best wedding speech I've ever heard." Later that evening, long after the guests had gone, Lucas and Maya sat on the porch steps, Emma asleep inside her crown, resting beside her sketchbook. The stars blinked above them just like they had that night in the vineyard. But this time they weren't witnesses to pain or reclamation. They were shining over something whole. Lucas turned to Maya. "Do you ever wonder what Jacob would think of all this?" Maya didn't flinch. She smiled, eyes full. "I think he'd sit beside Emma and teach her how to shade her stars." Lucas wrapped his arm around her. "And I think," she continued, "he'd tell me, 'You did it, Mom. You came back.'" Lucas whispered, "And you did." She rested her head on his shoulder. "So did you." In the quiet, they sat two people who once thought their best chapters were behind them. But tonight, with the scent of lavender still lingering in the air and the laughter of a little girl etched into the walls around them, they knew something deeper. The best stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with kindness, with staying, with choosing love again and again. And sometimes the wedding that really matters isn't the one that proves anything to anyone. It's the one that simply says, "We're here, we made it, and we're not going anywhere." Sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't written in fairy tales, but in ordinary kitchens, soft promises, and people who choose to stay. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about healing, about finding someone who doesn't fix you but stands with you just as you are. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and have you ever witnessed a quiet miracle like this? Don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories that remind us kindness changes everything. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep believing in love.